In episode 42, it's the second day of Lionel's anointment trial, so the story begins at Castle Plondor. Now, I'm not sure if Mungan had told Slythe about the second trial that Lionel's going to take, but he just told him that, and then Slythe wants to ask Mungan a question to say, are you sure that that information you gave me is correct? So Slythe must have suspected that something must be off, but Mungan told Slythe, the leader of the mutants, there's no mistake. The information is correct. The Thundercats are fighting amongst themselves somehow. And of course, Monkey just let something slip to Slide, the leader of the mutants, to say the reason why he got this information till this very minute is because he has a source that told him so. So even though Slythe agrees, but then he says that he'll believe it when he'll see it. Then Monkey says, wait, there's more. There's something else that the source told me that I should tell you, he said. Lionel's all by himself, and without his friends and his companion Snarf, Munchkin said. But that's not all. He's also unarmed, Munchkin said. Well, Jackalman just dismissed Munchkin's claim to say it was impossible, and then Sly wanted to know where did he meet this source at. Well, Munchkin just told Jackalman and Sly, the leader of the mutants, that he must have seen her in a tree or something. Well, even though Jackalman says if that's the case, what do you say we see for ourselves, shall we? So the three mutants left the castle with a couple sky cutters and a nosediver. So meanwhile, outside of Cat's lair, there's Cheetara up in the tree. She just woke up at the first light. But then, by the time she woke up, she knows that there are mutants nearby. Now Cheetara couldn't help but ask herself, what are the mutants doing and why did they show up all of a sudden? Anyway, back with Lionel now. As you can tell that in the last episode, he already passed his first test. So now all he has to do is meet up with Cheetara to take the second test. Then long story short, someone grabbed Lionel's arm. It's Cheetara. So even though Lionel had no idea what was going on, but Cheetara had to tell him anyway. They're mutants, Cheetara says. They're here, Lionel says, and we are hiding from them? So after Lionel had said no way he's hiding from those mutants, that's when Charles says, I should probably tell you, we should never let anyone interfere with the trials themselves, especially mutants. So after Chitara pleaded a case to Lionel to say that's against the rules, and that's when he says, oh yeah, you're right. So back with the mutants and a couple of skycutters and a nosediver, Sly, the leader of the mutants, was asking Jackalman and Muggan have they seen the Thundercats anywhere, and they told him no, they haven't. So Slythe made a suggestion to the mutants by saying, continue to scout the area. We'll continue with radio contact. And so they head off. So back with Chitara and Lionel, they had pleaded themselves a case to say they hadn't seen the mutants nor has heard them. So Chitara told Lionel, I see you won your first test already. So as proof, Lionel didn't hesitate to show Chitara the insignia that he had earned from Panther, then pleaded his case to say it was the hardest thing that he ever did. That's true, Chitara says, but you won anyway. So now I had to beat you in a race, Lionel said. According to what Lionel says in his case, now he's not so sure if he can go through with it. Then Jaga's spirit appears to tell Lionel that if he wants to become the Lord of the Thundercats, he has to pass these anointment trials. So in other words, in Jaga's case, he just told Lionel that he must go through with it. After Lionel was horrified in disbelief, he just told Jaga that would mean he'll have to compete and fight against his only friends, the friends that he had known. That's true, Jaga says, but not only that, but it's a learning experience for you. Even without the sword, Jaga says, you can still use your wits and ingenuity, and they are combined within you. But not just that, but you have the courage and strength as well. That's true, Lionel said to Jaga, but I'm not better than any of those Thundercats. No, that's true, Jugga says. You don't have to. But what you need to do right now is to prove that you are really the leader for the job, and you're suitable for it, Jugga said. Then Lionel has his turn to ask a question. What if I failed? Then Jugga has his turn to tell Lionel you will fail if you decide to give up before you can begin, and then he disappears. So before the race can get underway, that's when Lionel decided to plead his case to Cheetara to say that there's no way that he could beat her, and that he agrees that she's faster than him. So you're probably wondering, what was Lionel's plan? He said he wanted to take a direct route. However, Cheetara tries to warn Lionel the best way she knew how. She says, if you go that way, that'll be very dangerous, she said. That's true, Lionel says, but it's faster that way, and it's shorter too. But Cheetara dismisses Lionel's idea and said, that's impossible. Then Lionel has his turn to plead his case to say that's his choice. If that's the case, Cheetara says, then get going. And so he runs off first, and then Cheetara runs in the other direction. So meanwhile, in the Cat's control room, watching the screens were Panther, Snarf, and Tigra. But then suddenly, Snarf sees on screen the three mutants and a couple of skycutters and a nose diver that are heading their way. So after Tigra said to Panther that something must be done about it, and that's when Panther agrees. So both of them head to the Thunder Tank. And so the Thunder Tank heads off. So back with Lionel, who's still running, but this time in the rain and during a thunderstorm. But he manages to keep going no matter what. So Lionel, however, pleaded himself a case to say since Mud isn't doing him any good, and of course on the other hand, Mud won't be doing Cheetara much either. So long story short, back with Lionel, he arrived to where the giant flowers were, and he heard the sound of a river nearby. He figured if he can get to the river, he may have a chance. But something just grabbed him from behind. So long story short, while Lionel was struggling, in the treetop kingdom you see Nada, who's Willa's sister, who senses that Lionel's in trouble. When Willa, the leader of the warrior maidens, and also Nada's sister show up, she wanted to know from Nada what was going on. Well, Nada says, someone's in trouble, she said. So after Willa had learned from her sister that someone's in trouble, so she says, we gotta go investigate. And so that's what the warrior maidens did. So long story short, after Nada and Willa of the warrior maidens had arrived on the scene, they saw Lionel struggling and fighting. So Willa calls to Lionel to get his attention. She says, Lionel, hold on. I'll come rescue you. No, stay back, Lionel said to Willa. So Nina, who's the sister of Willa of the Warrior Maidens, just says, how do you like that? He's much too proud to receive help from us women. So Willa has her turn to plead her case to her sister to say she's not so sure of it, and that Lionel was usually never that. But then, just when things are looking bad for Lionel, that's when Willa told her sister, well, we might as well help out anyway. And so that's what the warrior maidens did. So by the time that the warrior maidens had made it down below, Nada took out her knife first, and she was about to step forward to cut the flower. But Willa is worried, and then told her sister, you may accidentally cut Lionel. And then she suggested to use her knife instead. So Willa with her knife stepped forward first to cut off the stem of the flower, but the flower's leaf pushed her away. But luckily for Nada, who's Willa's sister, she manages to save Willa. But luckily for the warrior maidens, they don't need to help Lionel after all, because what they saw was unbelievable. Lionel jumping out of the flower by himself. And luckily he did. Long story short, back with Willa, the leader of the warrior maidens, just shouted at Lionel to look out because the flower just came to life and grabbed him again. But let's just say Lionel took care of that situation by using all the strength he has to pick up the flower and deflowered it. Well, good news, Lionel is fine, and then he told Willa, the leader of the warrior maidens, "Excuse me, but I must get to the river immediately." So off he went. Well, Lion ran off right after Willa told him that the river's too swollen, but he told her it didn't matter much. So Nada, who is Willa's sister, wants to know from Willa what is going on with him. Although Willa said that she isn't sure of it, but they had to find out, they being Willa and Nada, and so they ran to follow Lino. So, okay, back with Lionel, he made it to the River of Despair, so now all he needs is a boat that could take him across. But he didn't have to look for very far because he saw some giant pea pods up ahead. So back with Lionel, after he saw the pea pods there nearby, he grabbed one of them, and then he had a thought that since it's big enough to hold a person, he thought, why not make a boat out of it? So that's what he did. Willa, the leader of the warrior maidens, was very curious to ask Lionel what happened to his sword and where it was. He almost accidentally let slip until he got a suggestion from Willa to take her knife because she says that the pod must be cut open, but he refused. But then Lionel had an idea. Since he couldn't pry the pod open, he uses the rock to cut it open. That's not a bad idea. Then again, he almost accidentally let slip to Willa that the reason why he's not accepting help to anyone was during the anointment trials. What do you mean? Willa asked. I don't have time to explain this right now, Lionel said. I had to get across the river and quick, he said. So before Lionel could head off, Willa gave him a warning to say, you know what, even if you do survive the river of despair, there are ferrets nearby. He said, who? Well, Willa explains that there are a band of villagers that will attack anyone that comes across the river. Then Lionel told Willow that, well, that's the chance I'm going to have to take. Then she tries to warn him about the Godrod rock that lives in the river as well, but Lionel refused to hear it, and so he heads off. Now that Lionel's on the Peapod canoe, he hopes he can make it in time to beat Cheetara. So speaking of which, back with her, she was being attacked by a trio of mutants and a couple of skycutters and a nosediver. Well, long story short, good news for Chitara, she managed to dodge the attacks of a couple of skycutters. Then she dove into the water and managed to get away from the nosediver. So good news now that Chitara's jumped out of the water, that's when a thunder tank out of nowhere just came to Chitara's rescue. And inside the thunder tank were Panthro and Tigra, who shot at the mutants and their vehicles. So Chitara thanked Panthro and Tigra for saving her when they did. So before Chitara could head off, that's when Panther pleaded his case to say, I know we're not supposed to be helping Lino, but the mutants are not supposed to be part of this. So back with the three mutants who are chased away thanks to the Thunder Tank, so since the part of their plan has failed, so they decided to go to plan B and go to the River of Despair. So that's what they did. So back with Lionel, who's still on the Peapod canoe, he's still trying to beat Cheetara across the River of Despair. But what Lionel doesn't know is that he wasn't alone, because a group of villagers known as the Ferrets had just seen him pass them by. So, long story short, back with Lionel, now that he knew that there are parents shooting at them with their blowguns, he knew what to do. He flipped the canoe over, and once he's underneath the canoe, it acts as his shield. Good idea. So good news for Lionel, he managed to avoid the ferrets. Now here comes another problem. He's now face to face with a school of piranhas that were living in the river as well. But long story short, good news for Lionel, the piranhas managed to avoid him. That's because they were turning away for some reason. Anyway, back with the mutants in three of the vehicles, the sky cutters and the nosediver, they were looking for Lionel anywhere, but they couldn't find him. So Slythe, the leader of the mutants, just told Monkey and Jackalman that Baby Monkey and Source can tell Slythe a lot more when they report back to Castle Plondor. And so that's what the mutants did. So back with Lionel still under a pea pod canoe, He couldn't help but wonder why would the piranha be scared for some reason. It wasn't Lionel himself that did it, so something else must have. But then he realized he's facing another problem, because up ahead is the whirlpool of infinity, and Lionel was about to be inside of it. This was bad news for Lionel. Things are looking bad for Lionel, but then good news, something saved Lionel. But now here comes the bad news. It's a god Rock, the one that Will had talked to Lionel about. So Lionel was now face to face with a two-headed creature known as the god Rock. So long story short, after Lionel had a minor setback with the god Rock, let's just say Lionel took care of it personally, and the god Rock went into the whirlpool of infinity. Well, anyway, Lionel just pleaded himself in case he hopes he has enough time to catch up to Cheetara. So, long story short, now that Lionel had found the other side of the river that was calm enough, he dove right into it, and good news for Lionel, he made it to shore. So now all he has to do is make up for the lost time. So long story short, meanwhile, the Castler's control room, Panthro just asked Tigra how our Cheetara and Lionel are doing. Well, so far everything's going well, Tigra says, and with Tigra are the Thunder Kittens and Snarf. So Tigers was watching this race going on the screen. Well, the red one is Cheetara and Lionel is in green. Well, Tiger, after he told Panthro the good news that Lionel's catching up to Cheetara, so all he needs to do now is just cross the ravine to catch up with her. So speaking of which, back with Lionel, good news for him, he made it at the ravine, so all he needs is a running start. And he did, and he jumped right across without a problem. So now here comes the next obstacle for Lionel. So anyway, long story short, now that Lionel had made it across the ravine, now here comes the tricky part. He made it to the next location, but luckily for him, he has an idea. He uses a bone for a bridge. And by the time good news, he made it across, now here comes the tricky part. If he doesn't pass out first, he'll be okay. So now that Lionel had managed to recover, that's the good news, he continues on his run. So now here comes the even better news. He's got 5 more miles to go. But Lionel's not alone because Cheetara shows up. So Cheetara asked him a question. What are you standing around here for? We got 5 more miles to go. I know, Lionel said. Then you do know what it means, right? Cheetara asked. As a matter of fact, I do, Lionel said. Then I see you've been defeated already, Cheetara asked. Nope, not yet I'm not, Lionel said. As a matter of fact, Lionel says to Cheetara, I never really lost until you won the race first, he said. Then I guess you know what this means. It's almost sunset. Indeed it is, Lionel said. So, are you ready? Cheetara asked. Yes, I am, Lionel says. So, let's go for it, he says. And so off they went, both he and Cheetara. So meanwhile in the Cat control room, watching it happen with Panthro, the Thunder Kittens, Tigra, and Snarf. So Snarf says, this is not fair because he says in his case that there is no way that Lionel can catch up to Cheetara with that speed because as he says, Cheetara is a lot more faster than Lionel. So even though Tigra agrees with Snarf, but then he just lets something slip to say, yes, it's true, Cheetara is faster, but there's a problem. Her super speed can only last a short amount of time. Oh, there is a catch, Panthro said to Snarf. If Lionel gives up and loses his heart and courage, he'll lose this race for sure. Of course, Tigra happens to agree with Panthro and says, Lionel may be a big boy in his age, but he's no quitter. So back with Lionel and Cheetara, the race continues to go on as planned. But then Lionel started to lose all hope. And he says, this is it, I'm done for. And Cheetara is getting the lead. Meanwhile, in the Cat control room, when Star saw that Cheetara is leading and is about to win, that's when he says, oh no. Cheetara's gonna win for sure. I just knew it, Snarf says. It's over. Back in the race with Lionel and Cheetara, that's when Cheetara is still leading. But Lionel pleaded himself a case to say, I may lose this race, but rest assured, it's not just because I gave up. And so he started catching up with her. So now, with only 2 miles left to go, that's when Lionel says, okay, I'll do this. So off he went and he started catching up with Chitara. Meanwhile, in the Castler's control room, that's when Star says, he's gaining. Lionel's catching up. He's not quitting. He's not giving up, he said. So Tigra, who agrees with Snarf and says, I never doubt about it, at least for a second. That's true, Panther said when he agrees with Tigra, but there's still only 1 mile left to go. So back in the race with Lionel and Chitara with only 1 mile left to go, so anything goes. So now that Lionel's caught up with her, they're neck and neck. And then finally, at last, back in the Kessler's control room, Snarf says, he did it! He did it! He won! That's my boy, Snarf said. So yes, it's true. Lionel beats Chitara in a race, but then he pleaded his case to her to say, you must have thrown me off the race somehow. Of course, Cheetara was not amused with that insult and said, how dare you say such a thing? Then Lionel pleaded his case and said, now we both know that I can never beat you in a race because he says, and this is indeed true, that she's faster than he is. Of course, Lionel also says, and is indeed true, that it's just not possible that he could run 5 more miles faster than she is. As much as I hate to admit it, Chitara says, it is true. I am faster. But the problem is, my super speed can never last for more than 2 miles at a time. Well, Lionel says, we both agree on one thing. The distance has become too much for us. Then Chitara says, well, one thing's for sure. You didn't give up, and you didn't quit. That I can admit to that, she says. Besides, you earned my insignia today. And so Chitara hands Lionel her insignia. That shows proofs that, yes, it's true. Lionel had just passed his second test. Meanwhile, at Castle Plondor, Monkey just told Slide, the leader of the mutants, and Jackalman what his source just said. He said that Lionel is going to have his third test next. But wait, Monkey insists, that's not all. Lionel's going to be meeting with the Thunderkins the next day. But Slide, the leader of the moon, says, wait a minute. I thought your source says that Lionel's supposed to be beating Chitara today, and all we're doing is chase her all day long. Are you sure if what your source says is true? Are you sure you're not lying about it? Slide asked. Why would I lie about that? Monkey asked. So meanwhile, in the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, we now realize who that source is. And it's none other than Mumra himself, and he pleaded himself a case to say, so it is true. Lionel is meeting up with the Thunder Kittens the next day. So later, back at Kessler in the control room, now that Lionel had passed his second test, now Lionel wants to know from Tiger, are you sure I have to go through with it? Every Thundercat Lord must go through with it, Tiger said. Well, Pedro said when it's his turn to speak, in his case, it's not just a ritual per se. It's just that it's the only way that you can prove that you're the rightful leader for the job, Panthro said. Well, I have to agree, Lionel says, but competing with each and every one of you is the most difficult task I've ever did. Then Lionel also says in his case he hated it, he despised it. You can't feel yourself that way, Snarf said. But one thing for sure, Snarf says, you still got a long way to go. Besides, on top of that, Snarf says, you got the Thunderkins test coming up next. So both Chitara and Panthro had pleaded their cases to Lionel that not even speed and strength alone can match up with them. So, in other words, what Tigress says in his case, that Lionel has to use every cunning trick in the book because it is true that the Thunderkins are the cunning ones. Then, by golly, Lionel says, If that is true, then that means I'll do my best. And one thing I can agree with, which is this: even if I am competing with you, and if that's the case, I'll remember who you all are. You're my friends, and none of this would be possible if it wasn't for you. Then Lionel says, that's something I will definitely agree with. So, yep, that's 2 tests down and 3 to go. And that ends episode 42.